Hello everyone and welcome to my Paladin leveling series. In this series of videos I'll be showing you how to solo level your Paladin in dungeons only with no questing all the way up to level 80. In order to follow along with this series I'll be assuming a few things. Firstly, you have access to heirlooms, and secondly, you do have a small amount of gold to invest in items as you level up. If you're leveling a character for the first time or you don't want to spend any gold on items or enchants, then your results with this method may vary. This is going to be the first video in the series where I'll be soloing SM Graveyard at level 30, so let's quickly take a look at my gear and spec, and then I'll show you what the run looks like. The spec that I'm using comes down the protection tree and grabs Reckoning at level 30. You can opt to use Blessing of Sanctuary instead if you prefer, but I like Reckoning at level 30 because it does add a bit of damage, and I'm also using Thrash Blade, so when you combine the two, it ends up being a lot of melee damage. But if you want to go Blessing of Sanctuary, that's fine as well. For glyphs, I'm using Glyph of Consecration, which really helps out with our mana problems, Glyph of Salvation, which adds a nice little damage reduction cooldown, and then Glyph of Lay on Hands for emergencies. The gearing at this low level is very important and can make a huge difference in your performance. To start off, we'll always be using heirloom chests, shoulders, and weapon, as well as 2 Swift Hand of Justice trinkets. This will pretty much remain the same the entire time while leveling through these dungeons. All the other pieces you see here are generally purchased off the auction house every 5 to 10 level. For stats, you should focus on a mix of defense and strength. Pieces of gear with the "of the bear" or "of defense" suffix are going to be your most preferred items. Luckily, these low-level items are widely available, and I can generally gear my character out for less than 100 gold. There are definitely some better blue items out there that are available to your character, but they're generally more expensive. If you want an even easier time, you can drop some extra gold and make a super powerful character with these items. Just know that you'll probably end up replacing them rather quickly. Another important aspect of leveling in these dungeons is to always make sure you're enchanting your gear. At level 30, the enchants we have access to are pretty limited, but they're still very important to have. You'll always want to have Crusader on your heirloom weapon, as well as 100 health on your heirloom chest, and after that, you'll just want to focus on defensive enchants for the rest of your gear. As long as you spend a little bit of time gearing out your character every 5 to 10 levels, you should have no problem clearing these dungeons at a pretty good pace. As we start the run, make sure to keep an eye on my experience bar so you can see how fast this method really is. The gameplay as a level 30 paladin isn't exactly exhilarating, and it often feels like you're going really slow, but you'll actually be surprised at how fast you level in these dungeons. To start things off, we pull the first 4 mobs of the dungeon and use Seal of Righteousness to get them down, focusing on the elites first. You generally only use Seal of Righteousness for this first group of mobs, and then we're going to swap over to Seal of Light for the remainder of the dungeon. A nice trick you can do is cast Exorcism and Hand of Reckoning at the same time when you're pulling. That way you get a nice little damage boost when you start combat. Additionally, when the mobs start to flee, you can use Hand of Reckoning on them for some more damage. For the most part, you're just going to be casting Judgment and Consecration and then attacking the target you've judged, and that's pretty much going to be your level 30 Paladin experience. It's not really that fun, but it does get the job done and allows you to solo these elites that most classes wouldn't be able to do. Speaking of other classes, if you're interested in leveling up a particular class in dungeons or seeing if it's possible, let me know down in the comments and I'll see if I can tackle it sometime in the future. I highly recommend you grab healing and mana potions if you're going to focus on dungeon leveling on your paladin. I can't tell you how many times a healing potion has saved me from dying when I accidentally pulled too many mobs. You won't have many cooldowns available at level 30, so grabbing some extra consumes when you go to the auction house to purchase your gear is a really good idea. Next up, we'll be pulling this group of 4 elites. This is probably the scariest pack in the dungeon, and once you get this one down, the rest is pretty easy in comparison. The composition of this group of mobs is random, containing any number of scryers or torturers. In any pack, I usually focus down the torturers first, as they have higher melee damage, and they also cast an immolate spell. The scryers cast Shadow Bolt over and over, and if necessary, you can just line of sight them. You'll most likely have to use Hand of Salvation and or another defensive cooldown to get this pack down. Make sure you always have Seal of Light active and always attack your judgment target. In an emergency, you can use a healing potion or use a Blessing of Protection and start casting Holy Lights on yourself. If you're able to get this pack down, then you should be able to do the rest of the dungeon with no problems. These mobs also flee when they're low on HP, so you'll want to make sure to pull them back. That way, when they do run away, they don't aggro another group or the boss and get you killed. Now you can pull the next two mobs into the hallway, and you can get them down with Seal of Righteousness or Seal of Light, whatever you prefer. And there's also going to be a patrol that goes around the room. You can pull him now if you didn't already, and you can get him down as well. In this clip, I actually pulled the patrol and then 2 extra mobs as well. So I pulled way too much, and I ended up having to use some cooldowns, and I had to use a healing potion. So just be careful with how much you pull. You can generally handle 2 to 4 mobs. Once you start getting into like 5 and you're already half health, you're probably going to die. So just be really, really careful with how much you're pulling, and be aware of what mobs are around you, because sometimes the aggro range is pretty big. Once you reach the actual graveyard, there's going to be 3 different types of mobs that you encounter. The blue ghosts are just normal mobs that only have a melee attack. The zombies are melee mobs that cast a healing reduction curse on you, and they should be focused down at all times. The elite ghosts are mobs that'll summon a phantom that can be killed by meleeing at one single time, or it'll automatically be killed when you cast consecration. This room allows for some bigger pulls, but generally you want to try and keep your pulls to a maximum of 1 zombie, 1 elite ghost, and 1 or 2 packs of normal ghosts. If you get more than 1 zombie, you can't really control the healing reduction and you may end up dying, especially when you're starting out at level 30. As you get higher and higher level, these pulls are going to become easier and faster, and you can add more mobs as you go. But at level 30, you should try and just aim for clearing the whole dungeon in probably around 20 minutes. This area is also where the bulk of your experience is going to come from, so it's really important that you get that first area down, because once you pass that, then you're really going to start flying through your level. There's also some neat terrain tricks you can do in here to kind of manipulate the mobs to not being able to melee you, but it's kind of hard to get down, and honestly you're better off just doing smaller and slower pulls. That way you don't have to worry about dying. This strategy of pulling 1 or 2 groups of blue ghosts, 1 zombie, and 1 elite ghost will last you until the end of the run. There's really not much else for me to say about the dungeon. It's super straightforward, and the amount of abilities at level 30 doesn't exactly leave any room for intricacies or finesse, so I'm just going to speed up the rest of the run while I talk about the experience gains. In this run in particular, it took me 17 minutes to clear the entire dungeon for a gain of over 25,000 experience. That's over half a level in just one single run. From what I've seen on Wowhead, the average quest at level 30 will grant between 2 and 3,000 experience. With 2 heirlooms equipped, soloing Scarlet Monastery Graveyard is like completing 10 quests every 15 to 20 minutes. Doing a dungeon this way also reduces all that travel time back and forth that all the old world questing usually has you doing. Undercity is only a few minutes away, and you can easily hearth and run back with very little downtime. After leveling 3 paladins like this, I can say that leveling a paladin this way is now the only way that I will do it. Scarlet Monastery Graveyard is also only the beginning of this dungeon leveling process, and it's also the slowest. As you gain more levels and talent points, the dungeons are going to get faster and easier and more efficient. So I hope if you plan on leveling a paladin in the future for the future phases to come, that you try out this dungeon leveling method and see if it works out for you. Also, a reminder that this is the first video in the series of leveling a paladin using only dungeons, so if you want to see the future videos where I go into the next level of dungeons, then make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on those. And of course, I'll always leave a link to my Discord and my other various pages down in a comment below, so make sure to check those out if you haven't already. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I plan on making much more content very, very soon, so stick around for that, and yeah, I'll see you guys. Peace.